Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balkavage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday, and I got a lot of emails and messages from people asking if I could help people understand how do they determine if they have cellular or tissue hypothyroidism. So today we're going to talk about the kidneys, because we can look at the kidneys as a really good indicator of, do I have potentially optimal levels of T3 at the kidney tissues, okay? This is a paper from 2022, and this quote says, a decreased renal T3, so decreased kidney T3, is the most common disturbance in people with renal kidney disorders. So if it's the most common disturbance in people with kidney dysfunction, we can use that as an indication of, do I have potentially have sufficient levels of T3, or do I have low levels of T3 at this tissue? So we can't just make a general comment that every tissue is hypothyroid all the time. We have to look at the individual tissues, because individual tissues get to regulate how much T4 is being converted to T3, and how much T3 is inside the cell and binding to receptors. So how do we go about evaluating the T3 status? Well, one of the first things we can do is we can look at, I always look at the thyroid panel first, but I'll get to that in a second. But GFR is the glomerular filtration rate, and the glomeruli are the parts of the kidney that are actually filtering a lot of the fluid. And your glomeruli are constantly working to filter fluids. Fluids are filtering. We're peeing some out. Some's being resorbed. Sodium, potassium, other minerals are being pulled in and out. And so kidney function is critical for health and well-being. So what is optimal? So optimal for the vast majority of healthy people should be over 100, probably closer to 120 would be considered an optimal glomerular filtration rate and be an indicative of healthier renal function. What you'll see on most lab reports is it greater than 60? Because below 60 is where we start to classify renal disease or disorders, things that require or might require medical intervention. But there's a big gap between 100, 120, and 60. And so just like in school, this would be more like the A range in school, and this is the failure range. We don't want to wait until your kidneys are actually failing and diseased to actually take some action. So when you look at your lab report, if it just says greater than 60, that doesn't tell you much. What we want to do is see an actual number here, okay? So I'll look at GFR. If GFR is under 100, then I'm starting to consider that the renal system is struggling a bit. If I have just a person who isn't diagnosed with a thyroid issue, I'll start to be concerned, is this a person who's got some level of tissue hypothyroidism going on? If this is a person who has been diagnosed with, say, hypothyroidism, and they're on medication, and they've been told that there's no problem, their thyroid physiology is restored because their doctor ran a TSH and a free T4, if this value is lower than 100, it's a good indication that even though their TSH is normal and their free T4 is normal, that they're not converting that free T4 to T3 or free T3 appropriately, and they have cellular or tissue hypothyroidism going on. So another marker we can look at is BUN. This is blood urea nitrogen. So we get proteins breakdown, we get ammonia. Ammonia goes to the liver, it gets converted into this stuff called into what we call urea, and then the urea comes back out into the bloodstream. We call it blood urea nitrogen, and it goes to the kidneys to get filtered out of the body, okay? Now, if somebody has a higher BUN, then one of the things we have to consider is that there might be reduced kidney function because they can't pee that BUN out, so it's staying in the bloodstream. So I have increased or normal BUN. Now, why would I say normal BUN? Because if the person has a problem with, let's say they have a gut issue, low stomach acid, they have hypochlorhydria, they have low protein intake, they could still have normal BUN with lower GFR because they have an issue with protein in their body. So that could be a reason it could still be normal, even though the GFR is low. So you have to interpret, you just can't read for highs and lows on a lab report. For a person who has, the other number we can look at is creatinine. So creatinine is a kind of a waste product from cellular energy production. So if it's high or normal, then we need to consider that we might have some reduced kidney function and potentially lower T3 state. Another thing we can look at is does the person have lower sodium? Do they have higher potassium? And do they have maybe a lower sodium to potassium ratio? Now, why would I say that? Because T3 drives what are called the sodium potassium pumps. And so if somebody has low T3 at the kidneys, there's a good likelihood they're going to pee out more sodium and resorb more potassium. Other things we can look at in a lab report is the total T3 less than 100, is free T3 less than 3.0. That would be a good indicator for why the kidneys are struggling. There's less available T3 in the system. Definitely if you're below 0.7, 0.71, you'd be lab low. If you're under 2.0, you'd be lab low for free T3. It's less likely that those values are going to be lab low, even sometimes when you're taking excessive amounts of T4, because the body, defending T3 levels in the body is a biologic priority. And so you'll see a lot of low normal T3 and free T3 more commonly, but there are people who take just too much thyroid medication who do have lab low T3 and free T3. The other thing we can look at is the free T3 to free T4 ratio. If that is less than 0.31, there's a good indication that the medication they're taking isn't being converted to T3 appropriately, and that they may have some cell or tissue hypothyroidism going on. The other thing we have to consider too is if we had a free T3 to free T4 ratio that was above 0.34, let's say 0.37, 0.41, this may be a person who truly is both cellular and glandular hypothyroid, especially if this is a person who's not on medication or isn't getting enough medication. That could be another reason that their kidneys might be struggling. So if you're looking at the kidneys, are they getting enough T3? We can look at total T3, free T3, free T3 to free T4 ratio. We can look at BUN, we can look at creatinine, we can look at GFR. If these values are out of what we might call the optimal range or even the lab reference range, that's a good indication that this person is struggling to get appropriate levels of T3 inside the kidneys. Now, what's the solution? Should we just give them T3? I don't think that's the option that we should do, because there's a price to be paid for starting to just load T3 into the system. Just because you give it doesn't mean it's optimally going to get into the cells and support the physiology. I know this sounds like a broken record, but what we need to do is look at the person's health and lifestyle factors to determine what's creating excessive cell stress. What might be causing their bodies to adaptively deep down regulate the conversion of T4 to T3. 2, we need to check and see if they are over-medicated. If they're over-medicating them, getting over-medicated with thyroid hormone replacement therapy, that could result in a reduced T3 state inside the cells and tissues. We also need to consider what other medications they're on that may be having a problem. And 3, I just see this too often. People oftentimes have chronic inflammation that results in a reduced conversion of T4 to T3. That chronic inflammation really impacts people at night when they're sleeping. Their nose gets congested. They have a tendency to breathe through their mouth at night. Everybody denies that it happens to them. It happens to almost everybody. And so if you do something to prop the nose open, whether it's nose strips or the little mute plugs that go inside, and you do some mouth taping, there's Somnifix, there's hostage tape, there's just regular tape that you put over. You can just get regular hypoallergenic tape that you put over your mouth. This can have a dramatic impact in T4 to T3 conversion inside cells, because when you mouth breathe, you create a hypoxia. The hypoxia triggers a danger response that reduces the conversion of T4 to T3 and results in low circulating T3, which could impact your sleep, blood sugar, and renal function. If you have any questions, put them below wherever you watch the video, and stay tuned for more Thyroid Thursday videos. Take care.